Tonight, we take a closer look at a story that's unfolding in real time, a story that stretches from the highest levels of government to the everyday lives of millions of Americans. We're talking about the global trade war and how its effects are now being felt in one of the most familiar places in America, the aisles of Walmart. For countless American families, Walmart is more than just a store. It's a lifeline for affordable groceries, clothing, and household essentials. But now, the shopping experience is changing, and not for the better. Millions of shoppers are feeling the pinch as prices begin to rise on everyday items. The Trump administration's decision to impose tariffs on imports, especially those coming from China, has sent shockwaves through the retail industry. Walmart, known for its everyday low price promise, is suddenly struggling to keep costs down. The foundation of its business model, offering the lowest prices possible, is being tested like never before. These tariffs were introduced with the intention of protecting American industries and jobs. However, the reality has proven to be far more complicated. Instead of simply boosting domestic manufacturing, the tariffs have triggered a cascade of unintended consequences, affecting businesses both large and small. For a retail giant like Walmart, which relies heavily on a vast network of international suppliers, tariffs translate directly into higher costs for the goods that fill its shelves. Every shipment that arrives from overseas now comes with a bigger price tag, and those costs have to be absorbed somewhere. This leads us to a crucial question. Who ultimately pays for this economic gamble? Is it the corporations, the suppliers, or the everyday people shopping for their weekly groceries? Increasingly, the answer is becoming clear. It's the American consumer who is left footing the bill. As prices creep up, families are forced to make tough choices, cutting back on essentials, stretching their budgets, and feeling the stress of rising costs. The decisions made in Washington, D.C. don't just stay in the halls of power. They ripple outward, affecting factories in Asia, shipping routes across the Pacific, and ultimately, the homes and wallets of people all across the United States. Warnings from Walmart and other major retailers about looming price hikes are no longer just speculation. They are becoming a reality, as executives publicly acknowledge the challenges ahead and urge policymakers to consider the impact on American families. This is more than just a business story or a political debate. It's a deeply personal issue that touches the lives of families everywhere. The true cost of a trade war isn't measured only in dollars and cents. It's felt in the everyday struggles of people trying to make ends meet, one shopping trip at a time. To understand Walmart's crisis, we need to revisit the Trump administration's aggressive trade policies. Tariffs were imposed on billions in imports, aiming to boost U.S. manufacturing and pressure countries like China. These were not minor tweaks. They were sweeping taxes that upended decades of global supply chain building. American companies, including Walmart, couldn't simply shift production overnight. There were few domestic alternatives. Forced to keep importing, businesses now faced steep new costs. Ultimately, these costs would travel down the line, from importer to retailer to the consumer at checkout. The first shockwaves of tariffs didn't immediately hit the average consumer at the checkout line. Instead, they reverberated through the quiet halls of corporate boardrooms, where executives and financial officers gathered to assess the looming threat. Behind closed doors, concern grew as companies realized the scale of the challenge ahead. Major brands wasted no time in sounding the alarm. At press conferences and in urgent memos, they warned that the new tariffs would force them to raise prices. Costs that were simply too large to absorb without putting their entire business models at risk. For many, the choice was stark: adapt quickly, or face potential losses that could threaten their survival. Even companies famous for their low prices and everyday value, like big box retailers and discount chains, suddenly faced a harsh new reality. Tariffs weren't just a distant policy, they were a direct tax on their operations, squeezing already thin margins and forcing tough decisions about how to move forward. The dilemma was clear and pressing. Should companies absorb the extra costs, risking their profits and possibly their future? Or should they pass those costs on to customers, knowing it could drive shoppers away and damage their reputation for affordability? Every option carried significant risks, and there were no easy answers. The impact was felt across a wide range of products. From sneakers and everyday clothing to living room sofas and kitchen appliances, the cost of importing essentials was steadily rising. Shipping containers arriving at ports now carried not just goods, but higher price tags attached to every item inside. These warnings from brands weren't just background noise or corporate complaints. They were early, urgent signals of a coming shift in the cost of living for millions of Americans. Headlines blared about price hikes, and shoppers began to notice the difference as they compared receipts and saw familiar items costing more. In many ways, brands became the canaries in the coal mine, translating complex trade policy into real-world consequences. Their warnings made it clear: higher tariffs meant higher prices for everyday Americans, affecting everything from groceries to gadgets. The stage was set for a tense and uncertain period. As businesses scrambled to adapt and shoppers braced for impact, both sides of the checkout counter prepared for a new era, one where every price tag told the story of a changing global economy. Footwear and apparel were among the hardest hit by tariffs. Giants like Nike and Adidas warned that higher import taxes would mean higher prices for consumers. Their solution, targeted price hikes on select products, could only soften the blow, not eliminate it. Fast fashion retailers, reliant on Asian supply chains, faced the same dilemma: absorb costs or risk losing price-sensitive shoppers. The entire fashion ecosystem, from luxury to discount, felt the disruption. Tariffs forced a painful reassessment of sourcing and pricing strategies. For an industry built on global trade, tariffs weren't just a nuisance, they were an existential threat. The tariff impact spread quickly to autos and electronics. Automakers like Ford and Volkswagen warned of higher vehicle prices as tariffs raised the cost of parts and materials. Electronics companies, dependent on Asian components, braced for price hikes on everything from cameras to computers. Even luxury brands like Ferrari and Hermes signaled price increases. Tariffs proved to be a blunt instrument, affecting every price point and product category. A single tariff on steel could trigger a chain reaction, raising costs throughout the supply chain. The uncertainty of ongoing trade negotiations made planning nearly impossible. Businesses faced a volatile landscape with rising costs and no clear end in sight. As the crisis deepened, Walmart became the focal point. The company's CEO warned that tariffs on Chinese goods would inevitably raise prices for shoppers. Essential items, groceries, cleaning supplies, toys, were all at risk of becoming more expensive. For many families, Walmart is a financial lifeline. Even small price hikes hit hard. President Trump suggested Walmart should absorb the tariffs, but experts called this unrealistic. The debate put Walmart at the center of a national conversation about who really pays for tariffs. With razor-thin margins, Walmart could only do so much to shield customers. Price increases were no longer a possibility, they were a certainty. Economists overwhelmingly agreed. Tariffs act as a consumption tax, paid by American businesses and consumers. When a tariff is imposed, it's the U.S. importer, not the foreign exporter, who pays. Retailers like Walmart, operating on slim margins, can't absorb these costs indefinitely. Studies from the Federal Reserve and others showed tariffs led directly to higher prices for U.S. consumers. The idea that foreign exporters would offset tariffs by lowering prices was debunked. The cost was passed down the supply chain, just as retailers had warned. The debate shifted from geopolitics to the rising cost of living for American families. Tariffs, intended to protect, were making life more expensive for those they aimed to help. The real impact of tariffs was felt not just in government statistics or economic reports, but in the everyday lives of American families. For millions of people, especially those in lower and middle income brackets, the effects of tariffs were immediate and personal. Every trip to the grocery store or local supermarket became a reminder of how global trade policies could reach right into their wallets. These households spend a much larger share of their income on basic necessities, things like food, cleaning supplies, and personal care products. Ironically, these are exactly the goods most likely to be affected by tariffs, since many are imported or rely on imported materials. When prices on these essentials rise, families can't simply cut back or wait for a sale. They have to buy them, no matter what. For families living paycheck to paycheck, even a small increase in the price of groceries, diapers, or school supplies can throw off a carefully balanced budget. Suddenly, a few extra dollars at the checkout line means something else has to give. The stress of stretching every dollar becomes even more intense, and financial stability feels increasingly out of reach. As prices crept up, consumer confidence took a hit. Shoppers became more cautious, often hesitating before buying non-essential items or putting things back on the shelf. Many families started delaying purchases of clothing, electronics, or home goods, waiting for better deals or simply deciding to do without. But when it comes to essentials like food and medicine, there's no waiting. These are purchases that can't be postponed, no matter how tight the budget. As a result, families were forced to cut back in other areas, maybe skipping a family outing, canceling a subscription, or putting off needed repairs. Tariffs squeezed already tight budgets, creating anxiety and forcing families to make tough choices every month. The stress of trying to make ends meet grew as parents sat at the kitchen table, poring over bills and receipts, searching for ways to save a few extra dollars. The trade war was no longer just a headline or a political talking point. It became a daily reality in homes and stores across America. Every shopping trip, every bill, and every tough decision was a reminder of how interconnected the world economy really is. The burden of tariffs fell hardest on those least able to bear it: the elderly on fixed incomes, low-income families, and parents with young children. For them, tariffs acted like a regressive tax, taking a bigger bite out of their limited resources and making everyday life just a little bit harder. Today, the dust has settled, but the effects of the trade war still linger. Uncertainty remains a constant in the retail world, with companies wary of future trade disputes. Businesses have become more cautious, hesitant to make long-term investments. The chaos of tariffs is a reminder of the risks in a globally connected, politically fragile economy. The Walmart story shows tariffs are a blunt tool, with costs landing on American consumers and businesses. Untangling decades of global integration comes at a steep price. As we move forward, understanding these realities is crucial, because trade policy shapes the prices we all pay.